Senorita.
All right, welcome back to episode 8 of the Slide In podcast. I'm Braeden Anderson. This is Kelly Galloup. No Johnny, thank God.
Tell him you said that.
I think he knows.
He did great.
No, he did great. He is so funny.
For those of you who don't know, every time we've had Johnny on a camera before that, it's like, where are we fishing today, Johnny? We're going to fish the Madison River.
The water flows south to north here.
He was like Johnny.
Yeah, Johnny when the camera's not out is...
I got a ton of people that, just acquaintances from speakings and shit that used to always ask me, what is he? I said, he's a little sickly guy. Just picking on him, right? And there's so many people, you're so full of shit. Oh, what a surprise.
Johnny's, not small nor sickly. We
should have let him put his chair up to normal over it. Oh
my gosh, I know. Well, we put him back in the corner, so him and I looked like we were about the same size. Not quite. I think one of the most fun things I've worked on. Did you end up watching any of those ads we put out for the Squala sale around Christmas?
Oh yeah.
Johnny, we did like 30 takes. And it wasn't a usable one, but it was. I was laughing my ass off. They're just so funny. He kept screwing something up and then cursing at me, and that always was funny.
On day number 5 of Squalapalooza, we are I hate you and I hate everything about you. For everybody at a... Can I get a lozenge in here? The Ennis location. I already said Ennis. You.
Okay, so today we've got a couple of things I want to talk about, but one of them was an email we got from Joe Hampton. I thought this was a pretty funny email. So he says, Dear Kelly and Braeden, I'm sending this message by email to the shop rather than leave a YouTube comment because of my high level of shame and despair. Well, sorry, Joe. Everybody's going to know now. He says, I have a confession. I am a swinger. Yes, I swing streamers, your articulated streamers, for trout in a particular freestone river and high mountain creeks in an unnamed state north of New Mexico and south of Wyoming. Might know where that is.
Maybe.
Yeah. Those people.
Nobody knows about it though.
No. And those people might be invading Montana, although we both did.
Who didn't?
He says, I catch fish but feel ashamed and dirty. I bought your book, great read, slidein.com, and have watched all your streamer videos and have made a concerted effort to follow the mantra of short casts across current. I even bought a certain streamer rod and sinking line available at a reasonable price at slidein.com. That was him, not me. No matter how hard I try to resist the urge, I'll inevitably give in and let that line swing a few times, just because. The 2 most recent violent eats I've experienced were in these moments of weakness. If time allows, in a future podcast episode, could you please briefly address and explain the superiority of short and across versus my sinful actions as a swinger? Thanks, and then he claims he's asking for a friend. So, Joe. Yeah, so Kelly, will you just talk a little bit about kind of, swing versus the across and more active retrieve?
Well, they're completely different beasts, really. And Joe, I've said in a lot of videos, if my only angle is a down, I'll take it. And I grew up swinging flies, and I don't swing for trout. I mean, we were just talking about that a minute ago, Braeden and I were, but I find it boring, and I don't feel like I'm engaged with quite the numbers of fish and in particular, and this, I don't want to sound like some sort of egomaniac here. In particular, fish over 2 foot, I just see a much higher rate of positive takes on an active retrieve that has gone across a fish. I think it's to get a really big fish to come out of his daytime holding zone and chase a fly, and it's just tough. It's not that they won't do it. They do. I mean, we fish a lot of big dry. Russ Madden does a lot of that big dry. And you get it. It's just that growing up, I didn't have the success rate. Now, it was pre all the flies, all the bigger flies and stuff like that. But I didn't have the same success I do going in and triggering those spots. And so, and every rivers, you get down the Lamay in Argentina, and, Johnny was down there with, what was it?
Ron,
excuse me. Ron Sorensen, and Ron was like, he's got lots of giant fish that do it on dry flies, and they'll come and do it. I've fished a lot of the world, and I've only seen a few places that happen. So there's different rivers and different situations. I just personally, it's not a sin to do it, like you said. And if you dig it, you dig it. I mean, I feel like I have turned more real fish, fish over 2 foot. And I've caught a few swinging too, and I've caught them, and I've had clients do it too. I've had clients in boats actively retrieve a fly and swing it downstream, just sitting there, and boom, get a giant to eat it. But it's not the repetitive behavior that I get when I trigger the fish. And you're wading, it sounds like to me, and I think wade fishing, it would behoove you to always, like Braeden does it. Braeden did it when we were filming. Braeden went out and stepped off a run on us and got a 28 plus, and that fly was on a swing, wasn't it? Was it on the drop?
No, it was on a swing.
That's what I thought.
A little bit broadside, not like a steelhead swing.
Yeah, that was a little more angled, which is, and that's okay with me too. I mean, if that flies, what I particularly, and I go back to kind of thinking steelhead swing, which, I said this once, you can't animate a fly on a swing well. And man, the Canadians just beat me up, boy. Like I'd never swung for a steelhead in my life. And you're so full of shit. But if you go underwater, which for those of you who would like to say that, you need to go underwater, because I've done it. I've been underwater a lot, and I've watched those flies go by me. And I don't care if you jig your rod like this on a static down. Cross is different. If you're swinging, you were pretty broad on that run. So you're coming river flowing like this, flies coming like this. You have more ability to animate your fly if it's cross current as opposed to being tight, because your fly goes like this. It doesn't really do much. You might think your little wrist twitch like this does something. It moves the fly a little like that. And now you're talking steelhead who like to chase things backwards anyway. They'll go squid eaters, right? And so there's a little difference there. But even just as foot traffic, just out wading, and I'm fishing, even though I say I don't swing, I hit my runs perpendicular to the flow going across. If I don't have a shot, I can assure you I'm putting it down straight down to that fish. I'm going to give every shot I can, but I try to come in and hook one so I can get at least a little bit of a run away from it, because it's just, to me, more natural that if you were taking off, you wouldn't go sit straight upstream, which your fly on a swing is pretty, my guess is on that fish, or fish two, the multiples, I'm guessing your fish, you got a tracer, you got one chasing your ass, right? And that's when you get them, man. When it turns and says it's heading up, that's when they get you.
Yep.
But I don't, it's kind of a joke for me more than anything, because I fish from a boat. Streamer-wise, I fish from a boat 95% of the time. And so I get those angles. It sounds to me like where you're at, you're stepping down a river and fishing it that way. And so, but the guys, all these guys that work for me are pretty much all converted over to that other pink side of the world where they're spey fishing, right? And they catch a lot of big fish. So, and you know what? I'll tell you that it's something I don't do as much as I used to. And I used to fish tandems. I mean, September 15 on, man, I'm running a tandem almost always. And one year, my best season of my life, up on this river, and I ran. It was a spectacular year, and I fished a tandem always. And I would tell people how often I would have this giant fish, and they would come up and just roll my streamer, just beehive that son of a bitch, and they're 2 foot behind it. I'd have had the same fly all season, smoke wagon, the original smoke wagon, little tiny green and white. It's like the ass end of a barely legal. That's all it is, except it had a yellow head. And they would come up and swarm that fly like something got them. They'd turn around, and here's this fly just hanging here, and eat it. Almost always downstream. They would come up, buzz the shit, just all over my fly, and I'm like, whoa, and turn around, eat that thing. And for some reason, I don't do tandems very much anymore. I don't know why. I did for a long time, but that was just one of those free. I think we just had like a bajillion giant fish move up. It was all between the lakes the 28 straight days, morning and night, every day, for 28 days. 26 fish over 2 foot.
Oh my God.
It was like, I haven't seen that many fish in 15 years up there. And so, that kind of, the fish swung it out. It had to be on a dead straight below me.
Yep.
And so every theory is disputable.
You were kind of, at least it seems like you were eliciting that behavior. Like you made the fish move on the big fly, and then it ate the little one.
Yep. And everyone was across stream, and, or straight up. A lot of those were, when we're walking and hitting up over, dissecting your run out.
Yep.
But I don't, and the other thing, I grew up before all this streamer thing, I grew up as a technical dry fly guy, guiding and steelhead. And that's what I did my whole life until I moved out here. And when we first started swinging for steelhead in the Great Lakes, we didn't swing that much. We basically Euro-nymphed them for all practical purposes. We were tight lining amnesia or really thin lines, and we were basically nymph running, right? And that's how we did it. But when we started swinging, particularly when the Skamanies showed up, and they started putting those things in, and my buddy Ray Schmidt, who probably the top guide on that river, had a lodge there, and Ray's an incredible spey caster. He's incredible everything caster. I mean, he's big old German dude. It was just such a great, Johnny brings it up. We were doing a video in steelhead, and Ray was swinging, and I caught this fish. I think I was indicator fishing, and disgusting. so I hooked this fish. Ray's he's bigger than Johnny a lot. He's a huge man. And I'm down there, and I hook this fish, and it jumps over my head, and he goes, "Holy shit, did you see that fish? It jumped over your head." And we're walking beside each other up the bank on film, and he goes, "Well, your head." But at any rate, Ray in particular, he, especially when he first started, him and Larry and just a couple guys back there, Larry Riding and Ray, and all, they're swinging a lot in the summer for summer runs, and they caught a lot of big brown trout. I mean, they caught a lot.
Now, do you think those are migratory lake fish?
No.
No, you think they're residents?
No, it's got a huge population of brown trout, and they did pop a world record down below that, about 10 miles, but that was a migratory fish. That was a fall run.
So
Roller.
That brings me to another question and sort of a point as well. I was trying to think about it on the way up here this morning. If I were to break down my own fishing, how much of each distinction I do, being, throwing a Spey rod versus a single hand streamer rod versus anything else. And I think I'm probably 70+% Spey rod. And then a big chunk of whatever's left is single hand streamer rod, and then I throw dries, some, not as much as I should. But over the last few years, and I hope this doesn't come across as a cocky statement. I don't know how many people there are in the world that are throwing Spey rods more than I am, right? I mean, I'm fishing 200 plus days a year. It's a lot of days with a Spey rod in your hands. And what I'm getting at is that hunting big fish, I've caught very few on my Spey rod. I catch way more on a single hand rod, throwing a big streamer upstream. And when I say Spey rod too, like, when people think Trout Spey, they're thinking, 3 weights, 4 weights, 5 weights, and woolly buggers and stuff. I'm throwing steelhead rods, right? I'm throwing 7 and 8 weights. I'm throwing dungeons and kitties and big stuff. And since I started doing that, I've caught way more big fish. Almost none of them have been on a swing, like a steelhead style swing.
Right.
So, question is, let's see, this is not really related to what I was just saying. Another question. I've noticed that in the Madison, they don't eat swung flies nearly as well as they do in the Missouri. And, the Henry's Fork, they actually eat them better than they do here. Have you noticed that with different river systems between Michigan, Montana, anywhere in between, that, a fish is going to be more likely to eat an active versus kind of a passive retrieve, depending on the system?
I don't know about more likely with the, obviously when you have a broken tailwater like this, it's freestony or whatever you want to call this thing, you don't have the opportunity. That's why it's so critical that you read water well, because your holding zones are your holding zones. You get onto the Mo, the whole freaking river's a holding zone.
They're everywhere.
Everywhere.
Yep.
And there isn't, and they get, in reality, probably 5 times the inspection, but you also push that wavelength out further, faster, because, this river's going 3 times the speed of that river, right? And every river's, that's why I said earlier, every river's different. This isn't the Henry's Fork. And there's sections of you want to see the Henry's Fork fish, go drop into the whitewater section of it one time. And see how fast those sunfishes will come out of nowhere on you. It's all rainbows, right? Which is a subspecies of a brown trout, but that's okay. They are badass. They pull. But I think that has a lot to do. And then you get in rivers that are even sections of rivers. On the white in particular, there's a lot of big trace areas where they'll trace that fly and they'll just go coming a long ways for you, right? And then you get into broken water and it's very reactionary, or dumps that come over weed beds, dropping into something where it's just, the fish has, and I think personally that's what makes them do what they do.
Yeah.
There's rivers in BC where the Bulkley, they absolutely love to eat a dry fly. I mean, they'll do the dumbest stuff you've ever seen. Other rivers that are, the Dean's my favorite, but I don't, maybe because it's the first time I went up with Mike somewhere, but there's broken water, and I can tell you that in 1 half-mile stretch, I watched, we were above the Giant, and above that in the 6-pack, it's broken, cascading, it's coming down. It's got a serious vertical drop through there. Like wading, it's pushy, right? In certain water. And I watched a single fish, eat Mike's fly, a size 2 humpy hitched dead center, 13 freaking times straight. And he ate it 3 times on one run, where he ate it, ran line, and let go. Now it's a steelhead, I'll give you that, right? And yet you can go down 500 yards below that, and fish are fish to a little bit, reasonable amount. And so you go 500 yards, and you're going to have inspection time and look and watch. There's steelhead, right?
Right.
But you go to the Missouri and you go to the Madison, both world-renowned rivers. The Madison has short inspection times, a lot of vertical drop on your water, which, fish don't necessarily want to run downstream 50 yards. Well, on the Missouri, you can run down 50 yards and float backwards almost. They're not putting out much.
Yeah.
You got a lot of inspection time. So, and then you got food, forage base. That's part of everything also. And so you really, we must said it in every video we've ever done. You learn your river, right? You can't just group them all into one. If you could, one guide could go to every river and be number one. You get into Europe, and those gillies have been there for 50 years, man. They know everything, and here too, some of them, right? And so we, from a cross-stream thing, went back to your original part of your question, though. I think a lot of this has to do with when you take, and just even forget the whole trout spey or the spey thing. You take a 9-foot rod as opposed to a 10-foot rod, and you have more trouble animating your fly cross current with a 10-footer than I do with a 9. You probably could do it better with an 8.5, but your casting and things there's a happy medium. And the spey guys were beating me up for one of my comments one time. And I said, well, I animate my fly in jerks, right? That's really hard to do with a 12-foot rod or a 10-foot rod. And so I like the fly to keep moving, however you do that, but I'm not trying to make my fly go from static, basically holding to like this, and then have that hackle breathe. I'm moving my fly sideways. I'm making it do weird shit.
Erratic.
Because erratic behavior is always going to trigger a response from every animal in the world. Yep. I don't care. I saw a dog get hit by a car and 2 dogs attacked it. They're all together.
Yep.
Didn't kill the other dog, in case you're wondering. He spun around in 2 circles, and he just squealing like he was dead. He was fine until the other 2 beat his ass. They come over and just started beating him up, right? They were all together. And it's just animal behavior. When things are looking, it's a trigger mechanism. It's just what it is. And so when things are passive, they, as a generality, aren't going to get attacked as much. If they're totally healthy, running along, there's an equation in nature. They get it. How much energy am I going to expend to do this? Right. Well, if one of your legs is broken, the other one's stuck in a leg hole, I got a better shot at getting you, right? It's coming in. It's
the wounded prey.
Yeah,
right?
It's like, this isn't too hard to figure out. And with yours, and I guarantee you, as much as you dumbasses do this, you guys and other people around, the more the scorpion and the frogging and the longer out and cross, you'll figure out a way to make things happen. It's just, but your tool isn't as well adapted to that style. The lines are different. Everything's different. It's not made so much to the shorter, faster rods get direct to the fly quicker, right? There's not the absorption in the rod. And so, and then like Joe said, he got his 2. Bullshit, keep doing it. Right. But, keep hitting your and I'm curious, like I wish I was fishing with you when I saw it, because I would be curious to see how people break down their water. Like, do they see that pocket right there? Do they see that triple checkerboard where there's 3 weed beds, and you know that fish is stationed right there behind this one, and he's coming in from that angle. And did you hit that with your deal? Did you come right across it? Did you hit that bucket? Did you see that mid-flat? And, if you would have crossed that mid-flat hauling ass, you would have got a fish. Yep. And then but did you swing it and, inadvertently, not even knowing, did you cross it before you got it, right? And so there's just a million, and then there's just flat dumb luck.
Well, so I think that
which
has
is how you exist.
Huge piece of it, right? Yes. So you're
that was bad.
One of your mantras has always been, hunt more, hope less, hunt the fly, don't hope the fly, kind of that ideology. Swinging is inevitably hoping your fly, but you can do things that allow you to hunt more. So,
now, my steelhead side just came out of me very quickly. I fished with some of the best steelheaders in the world. Mm-hmm. And I agree with you. That's one of the things I had against. I don't have anything against anything. I don't give a shit what anybody does. One of the things I always say was that when we started just flat-ass casting so far, just to cast, because there's nothing cooler than watching a spey. There's nothing cooler than fly fishing. To watch that thing unroll, and guys like you and Peter Humphreys and the guys like that just can do these magic things with it, it's cool as shit. But 100 feet out there, you can't read every seam in that river. And so I said that whoever it was somebody up by you that said, who sells, like one of the biggest spey guys in the world, sales-wise. And he said the single best thing that ever happened to steelhead was spey fishing, to steelheading was spey fishing, and the single best thing that ever happened to steelhead was spey fishing, because people stopped catching as many fish for. But I don't think that stayed there. I don't. You people, you all got short games. You all, especially trout anglers, when they come from a dissecting water and they start dissecting. And there's nothing that says you got to throw a 100-foot cast. And you can throw a 30-foot cast and hit the shit in front of you. Yeah. Well, now that cat comes down the road, and here's me on my single hand, and I might be able to get an 80, and I hit this one, hit that one, and I'm working it. Well, that other guy hits all those in front and then goes out there again and hits that one. Mm-hmm. That's when Ray Schmidt says, over your head. It's that. I got to think about that for a second. What was your original question right there?
Well, what I was getting at is hunt, don't hope, how swinging is more hoping. You can still do things to hunt your fly while you're swinging. But I think for me, swinging works better on rivers where there's tons of rainbows.
Now, this started with Joe. I don't think Joe was two-handed. I think Joe's single-handed.
Humphreys?
No, the guy, the original question. When first started.
I think he's single-handed. He's throwing 9 foot.
But he's swinging. He's swinging it out
down
not
below.
far. Yeah. So, and again, now we got to check, is that thing coming cross stream? Is it getting a long-ass belly cross stream and still coming across on a, panicked look?
Right.
It's hard telling without being there. But
so I think, this hunt, don't hope thing, swinging works better. For whatever reason, I catch way more rainbows than brown trout doing it. Rainbows seem to be more receptive.
They all have
to
a
fly.
steelhead gene in them.
Yes. Yeah.
And so, steelhead go to the ocean and eat things from behind them.
Yes. Yes. Yep.
So, and if people don't want to believe that, that's foolish, because every fish is different.
Yeah. Every
they
fish
have a lot of
ways.
They have like tendencies, and they can be triggered. But rainbows, without exception, anywhere in the world, are more chasey than a brown trout.
It's like dogs, right? Border collies are herding dogs. They're smarter, and then you've got golden retrievers that
I
are
have
dumb
2
and
border
happy.
collies that will question that smarter part.
Yeah, okay, all right. But they herd.
Yes,
Shit, Ellie thumped the shit out of my knee about a month ago.
She's gotten my horses now, and this is not good. She's on the shock collar world. She won't go near one with a shock collar on.
Well, that's...
Poor girl. But she will sit underneath my backhoe and bark at them.
Yeah, I remember one of the first, this is a total aside, we'll try to get back to that, but one of my first days at the slide end, I was living in how long is that trailer? 24-foot trailer?
Maybe.
With Matt.
Yeah.
Separate beds. And,
sure you were.
A call comes in, and I think Johnny's sitting over here, and he answers it, and he goes, okay. Oh, he's not going to like that. Okay. All right, I'll let him know. He goes, Braeden, you got to go climb in the septic tank over at Kelly's. Go grab some clothes you don't care about. So I'm like, oh, you got to be shitting me. Okay. So
literally.
So I run back to the trailer. I remember taking my clothes off and then going through everything I brought out, which wasn't much because I thought I was just going to be here for a summer. And then
I didn't think you'd make it that long.
Then I looked down, I'm like, well, I don't have any clothes I don't care about. So I just put right back on what I was wearing, jeans and a T-shirt. Run over there, and you need to help planting trees. It wasn't septic tank stuff. So yeah. I don't know if it was you or Johnny that was pulling my leg, but I remember seeing Dudley biting the tires on the tractor. And I waved at you to stop. I'm like, hey, your dog's right here. And you go, he's been doing that shit since before you were born. Well, I don't know about dog years, maybe. Okay, so back to this swinging thing. I tend to do better with rainbows when I'm doing more of a steelhead style swing. So for those that don't know what that is, quartering down, if your river's going this way and I'm on the river right, at a quartering angle down and then a slow swing across. And steelhead guys, will vary the speed of their swing, but that's what we're going to refer to. I call it a dead swing or a steelhead swing. For brown trout, so I do a lot better with rainbows with a steelhead style swing. For brown trout, active retrieve. I've done so much better with brown trout, moving that fly, whether it's a really fast swing, a down and across move, even throwing it pretty far downstream and stripping it back up. It's just some sort of active retrieve. Now, I can try to find this clip and put it in here, but one day I wore a GoPro going down from Varney. You go under the bridge, and then that right channel splits off, and then that water moves left, and then there's kind of a pinch dump. There's that tree on the right that's kind of hanging out in the river. I'm river left, and
Y'all don't know what river left and right means because everybody says
that's a good
it.
clarification point for sure.
And I get asked this in the shop almost daily. What the hell do you mean by that? Left or right? The river's judged by the flow. If you were floating, river right is on your right side because you're floating down the river. There's also lookers right and left, which is different. That's the opposite.
Yes.
So there's lookers but river right is with your flow.
Yeah, look downstream,
That
right and left.
Right and left, yes.
So I'm river left. It's really soft water on the banks on each side after that push comes through, right? It's kind of a traditional V-style run, and then it pushes right. But I know that, in there, big fish are likely going to be in one of three places. Either the soft water on the far side, the soft water on my side, which is really hard to swing to because you end up basically standing in it when you're going to start swinging. Or in the middle, it's pretty big water and then it all drops, kind of like it does at Jacqueline's, right? There's a shelf in the middle. And I was looking for migratory fish. I feel like a migratory fish is more likely to sit at the bottom of that big water than a resident fish. So what I did is, swung my water that it made sense to do a slower swing on. Didn't get anything, so I switched to a big fly. I was throwing a white flathead kitty. And what I did is throw across to the soft water, basically trying to plug it into the bank, into the really skinny stuff. And then with the setup I was fishing, it was a 22-foot floating head and then 10 foot of T8 and then a short 3-foot streamer leader. So that floating line catches the big water in the middle of the run, which means my fly is going to come downhill first and then kind of sweep across. And then it's not really going to flip.
Perfect.
Exactly, yep. So it's not going to flip until it comes up. And I switched to that action on the first cast, got a good brown trout, it was about 19. But I think that is relevant to Joe's original question of, especially when you have, right there.
High likelihood where he's at, he's in Rainbow World too.
Yes. So swinging definitely, but for
Trying to put the coordinates together.
yes, yeah. For the brown trout, it comes back to reading water, right? I see that big water in the middle as a way to animate my fly on the other side. Whereas it's really hard to animate that fly. It's really hard to go down and across when you don't have some kind of moving current.
Or being above it as a
way out.
traditional set.
Yep.
It's hard to do or impossible.
And, when you're fishing water where, like right there, the Madison's a pretty big river. A lot of the time it's running between, 1,000 and 1,300 CFS down by town.
Or more.
So, and there, you've got a channel that breaks off to the right, so you're not working with that much water. But in that choke point, it's a place where you could actually cast across it with a single hand rod, not a spey rod. I mean, I'm probably shooting 10 feet of line, so it's not like it's a super long cast, 35, 40 feet.
Which you'd have more control on your stuff there too.
Yeah.
That's one of the downsides of swing is if you're not really, I don't care how good you are, it's still kind of hard to, if the water's too big, to get control once your belly gets hung in that thing. If you're on a traditional set, like what you call the steelhead set, your fly's kind of coming like this, like you would on a wet fly swing with a traditional trout. You're not setting your line and making it arcing around because it starts nuking.
Right.
And nuking flies, they're just wide open. That's not going to happen either, no matter how you do it, even with a single hand. And so, but I mean, speed is everything. And by the way, we're always beating up on the rainbows. We love rainbows, but there is a big difference between them and their chase. That's why, they've always called brown trout the weariest of all trout. And they're very, all of them are nocturnal, but they're not nearly as chasey in most rivers as a rainbow. So
right. I think especially when you start getting into colder water.
Yeah, maybe. I really thought about that. But yeah, they're a different being, and it's just, and we always make fun of the rainbows. It's kind of a badge of honor to pretend like you don't like them, but
it's cool kids club.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and so but a 2-foot rainbow is just.
I mean, a 2-footer's 2-footer.
Yeah, it still is.
But a 2-foot male brown trout.
Yeah, everybody likes the browns because mostly it's because they tend not to do as often. They don't make the mistakes as often. They won't run 30 feet very often. They won't trace 30 feet very often. I've watched so many days on really giant, like the white and places like that where it's really big. Man, to get a brown trout in places where I may be trying to hit 2 zones, where the water's not that fast, and I can see my fly, I can track it, and to see a fish come off a bank or a cut, and to see him make it all the way, like you see him. I mean, I might be a 7, 8, 9, 10 pound fish. You can see it coming, right? They've made you. They might run the curiosity kills the cat thing, but they don't very often make that final mistake. Right. Whereas rainbows, I've had them eat them under the boat. So,
Yeah, brown trout are, from my experience, smarter than rainbows. Now, if you think we're full of shit,
or maybe more weary.
Yeah, maybe more weary.
I don't know about smart. I don't.
Yeah, smart.
Johnny's caught them. They can't be that smart.
They can't be that smart.
Where was your question before that?
I don't remember. So, in terms of animating flies, I think whether or not you're throwing a single hand rod or a Spey rod, I mean, I jerk and jig flies on Spey rods. It's harder.
I think vertical jigging is easier than a jerk strip would be. I mean,
the jerk strips are super hard.
Yeah, it's just too much rod, too much.
It's too much rod, and then it depends on what running line you're using. I've got integrated lines. I've got loop-to-loop connections where I'm running essentially amnesia, and I've missed a lot of eats mishandling thin line.
Yeah.
Right, where they grab it and you feel it go out your fingers, and that's simply a line handling thing, but I like those because they're more fun to cast. But in terms of retrieve styles, one that I really like with a Spey rod that I don't do nearly as much of with a single hand rod is, take Jacqueline's for example, right? Mm-hmm. It sets up somewhat similar to that run below Varney, but let's say I'm on river right below the cliff, big water in the middle, right? Mm-hmm. Soft on either side. What I'll do is throw it slightly upstream from perpendicular to water flow. So I'm throwing it a little upstream, getting that downstream belly, which is how you would fish. I mean, I've watched you, we filmed it a dozen times. Same angles, right? Mm-hmm. With the chunky floating head, it almost acts like an indicator. And where you lose control, you're gonna pick up on the visibility of an eat, but it's going to fly so fast. What I do is basically a vertical jig, but I don't catch up to it. So instead of stripping down, I'm lifting up, that fly chugs downstream, and then I know with that floating head, that water speed's going to pick that up way faster than a sinking line, right? Because our water's a lot faster in the top of the column than it is down,
Right.
where a sinking line may be at that point. So then instead of a strip down to it, in an effort to slow the fly down, I'll actually let it pull slack. And it's not, you lose great control. Your hookup ratio falls, but I think that you have to be paying attention, but you'll see that line shoot when that thing gets eaten. Like you'll see the line go. It's like tight lining, right?
Well, if you see it, they've already got it. So
Right, and then whack them.
yeah,
But so that's one retrieve style I do. I do a lot of pulling the rope when I'm throwing spey rods. If you can get that fly coming across, I mean, it's gonna move pulling the
down,
rope when you've got full tension on it, and it works. I mean,
yeah.
like we say, it's just another trick in the bag. Doesn't mean you can't ever do it.
So I say, you guys you get more and more and more and more. If all you do is swing it traditional style, you'll get bored. I mean, you will not put the numbers trout-wise. I mean, but again, I don't know, when we were talking at some point, who gives a shit how many fish you catch,
Right.
Some guy wrote in, I say that kind of offhandedly frequently, some guy, when I do read them, I don't ever look at the name because nobody's got a freaking name.
No,
It's all.
Yeah.
So I just say some guy. I don't mean it backhand like some of this ass. I don't. It's like J.M. Zebra Head or whatever. Nobody's got John Doe, and so. But one guy wrote in. He was asking about. Forgot what I was talking about there for a second. Which one? There was two guys I was thinking about. Anyway, he was talking about same thing, swinging and flies, and about our comment and something about bamboo, and it went from, he wanted us to talk about bamboo, which I have fished a lot of, and Bob Summers was a friend of mine, and the Paul H. Young Company I shared a business with, a building with. But he said, and he went to the fact that he remembered and I've heard this story so many times, not necessarily frequently with the bamboo. I remember the first fish I caught with my first fly I tied, and the first fish I caught when I felt it through grass, through cane. Mm-hmm. And he was going on. It was spawned by the maybe swing stuff, but it was one of the ones we did before. I can't remember which one it was. And we were talking about, maybe it was etiquette, whatever. At some point, everybody changes, right? You just like, it was probably the Euro thing. And we were talking about that, where the guys went from, you want to catch every damn fish in the world. I mean, Robert Trevor wrote about that, the Fisherman's Prayer, and some of that stuff, but how you start with wanting to catch every fish, and then, bigger fish and the biggest fish, and then you want to go home and just catch a fish, right? Or however it goes. And so like the swing thing, one good fish, maybe it would be great a day. Who cares?
Yep.
I mean, I spent my whole life steelhead fishing, and outside of getting way east, catching 2 or 3 fish in a day was hallelujah.
Right.
I told that story about Harry Lemire. He rose, hooked, and landed 3 fish. Shouldn't that be enough, young man? Yes, John Wayne.
Yes, Joe.
The swing thing, no matter what it is in earth, and I don't know why we get hung up on this shit, because who cares what anybody does? But, I loved shooting bows, right? And I quit. I had that thing with my shoulder, and I quit. And I liked just shooting a recurve and a longbow. And I don't like my compounds, and my cousin, a lot of my buddies are crossbow guys now, right? And I don't I don't dig it. I don't I don't care, you know, that you do it, but I like to just go out and shoot at a round target or a ball or whatever with my bow. I don't give a shit about, I just like it, right?
Yeah.
And so, and for every sport in the world, virtually, there's that, you know, archery is a big one where everybody, I mean, I loved listening to Flip Pallet. Anybody that's not listened to the Millhouse podcast with Flip Pallet, when he goes on and talking about, he likes to make things, right? He just likes to make them. And he likes to have arrows that aren't perfect and fletchings that are made from, I think he said in one, he will only use fletchings off of a turkey he shot. And he strips the quills and he does the thing and he knocks the arrow and he does this and he gets a certain, and he only uses certain points and blah, 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 blah. He doesn't do that because he wants you to think he's, you know, better than you. He doesn't do it because it sure shit doesn't put you more game on. I mean, when you can sit there with a rifle scope on a crossbow and roll that thing out close to a bullet speed, Jesus, how do you pretend that's a longbow, right? Well, who cares? And he doesn't. He says, I just like it. Period.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head, right? I mean, everybody talks about, you know, the tight line grab, the tug is the drug, all that stuff. That's why I do it. Well, why I do it, there's a couple reasons. One, a tight line eat feels different than anything else. Like, I love catching fish on big streamers, on single hand rods. The visual aspect of that is really cool. It's, to me, it's rare to actually feel that eat. A lot of the time it comes on the pause or on the drop when you're not directly connected to that fly. Now, every once in a while, you know, you're looking off somewhere else and, you know, you set
That's never happened to me.
Really?
Ever.
Okay, well, yeah, it happens to me because I'm an idiot and I look away from my fly.
There are no bird watchers.
But that tight line grab, I mean, and if you haven't felt it, go swing soft tackles or something. I remember the first
Talking
time.
about steelhead or trout?
Anything.
Doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter. I mean, even trout hit. So the first time I ever swung flies, I went out to the Cedar River, which is right near Seattle. It was after work. And I'd bought some soft hackles because I'd seen a YouTube video about swinging flies. And the Cedar River's not known for having big fish. There's a lot of 4 to 7 inch cutthroat in there.
Just right for you.
Yeah, perfect. I went out there and, you know, I start swinging this fly and a couple casts in, it gets absolutely hammered. I thought I was into a 20 plus inch fish for about 2 seconds. I mean, with the aggressiveness that those little fish show. I mean, even when I'm throwing a 7 weight out here, looking for big brown trout, small rainbows, small brown trout, hammer the thing. And like, to me, that's really enjoyable. I'm not here to land fish. I really like the eat. That's what keeps me in it. And the casting's really fun too.
Tight line eats are, I used to tell people that you'll know you're good when you can tell the difference between a willow leaf and a maple leaf. Yeah. Right? When you're swinging through and you're like, oof, you know. But when they really jack you, obviously it means they're sideways on you. They've got it. They've hit it.
Even downstream. I remember Chuck and I went up to Lando, secret place. Nobody knows about it. If you like jet boats, go to Lando. Where, you know, we're swinging weed beds there, and I was up on the cliff spotting fish for them. And it was the first time I'd ever seen, you know, there's so many fish per mile up there. You know you're going to have interactions.
Yeah, they only plant like 1 million in that lake.
A lot of fish with no fins. Fucked up noses and stuff.
Messed up noses.
Excuse me. So I'm up on the bank, you know, it's kind of a cliffy-like thing, looking down and watching Chuck's fly swing in, and there's like 4 fish that are swiping at it. And I'm like, twitch it. And then he twitches it once, and then something just crushes it going downstream. And it explained there's times where I'm swinging and it feels like it goes 0 to 60 like that. Well, that fish has probably swiped at it a couple times and then crushed it going downstream or broadside.
I think my favorite swing eats are when I have my hand on my finger and I feel it go.
Yeah, just the tap.
Barely. It's like, oh, you're there. Yes.
Yeah, that,
You know, there's a thing with wet flies, traditional wet flies. I've got it in my Cripples and Spinners book because you can do it I do it with steelhead a lot on when I'm skating dry flies, a slip strike, where you just drop that's how I was taught to, because when I learned to fly fish, all we did was swing wet flies. And on 9-foot cane rods and 2 or 3 fly, pretty big. And we would swing them, but when the fish comes at it, they don't have really time to eat it, right? And so you put this loop in your hand just like that. And I've got it in my book. It's so simple. And you can do it on dries, you can do it on anything, but on a wet fly swing, if you set, which is the kiss of death for trout people, always when they start steelhead and always beat their fish, they, especially on a dry fly, they'll just jack that rod backwards and fly. And if you do that slip strike, boom.
The strip strike thing has always been interesting to me. I know
Slip
strike thing. There's one guy on YouTube who I see do it a lot with steelhead. It's Captain Quinn. He makes a bunch of videos up in the middle of nowhere in Alaska. But he's the only person I've ever seen, besides my dad, who will, when they get meat from a steelhead, jack them. And I know conventional wisdom is always, let them pull a lot of drag on you before you down to the side, right? And that's what I try to do. And for folks who, I finally beat it out of my system after about 4 or 5 years. But if you set when you get eats swinging, put the rod in your left hand. You don't have muscle memory. So a lot of the time you'll be able to essentially resist the urge to trout set by just putting your left hand.
I told you I watched Mike on the Dean have a fish. I'm standing on a cliff about 10 foot over the water.
Yeah.
He's walking the edge, thrown to the shallow water, all boulders. And the fly's skating, and I see the fish chase it and eat it. And I see it turn and run 20 feet of line and let the fly go. I witnessed that 13 times and did not get the fish. And every time it ran, same fish. You can see it. It's out there sharked all up crazy. And it just had bit the fly, but it just never. And then we told somebody else about it that owned a lodge up there, and they said, yeah, that's cute, but Jill got hers. But they had it on film for 17 eats, on film. And that was the crescendo when he goes, but Jill got hers.
There you go.
But that fish, they can bite, and there's no way you can. And Mike's setting it on it, and Mike's jacking them. This is single hand days, 9.5, 8 weight sage, right? We all fish the same freaking rods. And my first dry fly steelhead, I had read all that shit. And that thing I jacked that thing so hard. My freaking elbow still hurts. And
that's when it helps to
it was
not
like,
pay attention.
it just got,
go watch the birds.
I got totally lucky that it just stuck.
Yeah.
I mean, but there's no way it just, the water seemed to suck out of the river where he ate it, and he'd already turned on it. I mean, he had it and got lucky, but yeah.
I don't
know where that goes, where we got on that one, but.
Well, I think there's plenty of luck involved with it, like especially tight line eats, right?
Yeah.
In terms of whether or not it's gonna hook up. I mean, the other day I was up swinging the mow, and I started off 0 for 12. It was 2 p.m. before I landed a fish, and I counted. I had 12, like not solid eats. Some of them were bumps, but a couple of the fish I jumped, and like 0 for 12 is a statistical anomaly. I couldn't believe what was happening, and then. I think I went 7 fish in a row of landing them. And so there's definitely an element of luck.
If you want to see that not be an anomaly, put a camera behind your ass. And go out there and go, catch every fish in the river, put a camera behind me and lose 10 fish in a row.
Yep. It was like that
How'd
day.
that happen?
the first fly show we ever shot with Johnny. I think we talked about it a little bit, but got a couple fish on the olive boogie, flipped over to a yellow dungeon, and it was where, remember Jim, he calls it the hurt locker, that river right, when it peels away from the highway. We went Johnny almost parked the boat on a rock in the middle. You remember that?
Mm-hmm.
And then we swing, so we go left, right, back, left, classic Johnny style, just going sideways across the river. And I think you lost 3 fish over 20 on that bank. And it's just, and I'm watching the footage. It's not like you did anything wrong. You stayed tight on them. You hit them hard when they ate it. Like, those fish were pinned, or maybe they just had it in their jaws and they weren't pinned. But
I am 100%, I've watched it many, many times, that they can bite a fly and there's no, Mike was jacking that steel. This isn't a big steel either. This is like a 10-pound hen, right? This is not a, oh my God, there's no way you can lose it. This is a super active, like this 10, 11 pounders are always the psychos, right? And I have seen brown trout so many times just shaking their head, just, and you can see their mouths closed, gone.
yeah,
You never had a hook, and you ain't hooking them. You're not gonna set that hook. You might think you pull straight at them. The one that my good friend Chris Gamble, he just died a couple weeks ago, way too young. But Chris and I and Mark Mackle, I think, were fishing, and where the short hook came from was not trying, when we started articulating flies, it had nothing to do with making flies bigger. We actually made them smaller because we used those giant hooks. I've showed that 100 times. The hooks we used in the early days was this Carrie Stevens hook. That is a long, there's a Swimmy Jimmy. This fly is not as long as that. And that hook, and I had this fly, but it was a chartreuse woolly sculpin. And we threw up into this shallow bank, and with this hook, and we saw, I don't know why I was fishing, because I just was, and I'm pretty sure it was Chris was rowing, and this fly comes across, and this fish comes sideways and bites it, and it goes poof, and he's got it in his mouth, and now the fly's in his mouth like this. This is a giant freaking brown trout. I mean, like,
big one.
This is a 7-pound fish, and there's chartreuse fly sticking out like that. Now, I was still pretty large then. I was probably 220, 30 then, muscle head, and I don't set my hooks like this. I set that thing and I pulled on him hard, and then as soon as I went, and I set sideways on him twice, and every time I'd pull, you could see the fly go. The fly's in the somebody, and my fly, I'd pull on that thing, and the hook would do this. Wasn't doing a thing. I mean, I jacked that thing with 200 and some pounds, and my fly just stood there like. And he went like this. He went right, left, turned, looked at me, and opened his mouth, and I got the rod right in the forehead. We all saw it. It was like, are you kidding me? And that, you just don't. It happens. Didn't even have a camera on.
I'd be really curious to see like what their bite strength is. Like, I know, they measure that with hippos and crocodiles and all sorts of animals.
Dogs.
Dogs, yeah. But I got to imagine to see the damage that they can do to other fish,
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't think the inside of a brown trout's mouth is a particularly hospitable place.
I don't know. It was enough that I couldn't set the hook, and I watched Mike's do it. I mean, I've seen tons of them. I've seen lots of fish eat. Just clobber, and just see their mouth open and fly comes out.
Yeah.
I told you that time I was jigging Nancy's. I was jigging this. I was fishing for trout, but I was in a bull trout zone. And I watched that. I'm jigging this thing. It's pretty shallow water, probably 2 foot. For those who like to chase those things, they absolutely annihilate these flies. They know it's food. And I was jigging it kind of like this. You can't vertically jig a fly. You can only kind of go like this, right? And that bull came over and it grabbed the head of that thing right there. Fly's coming, and he bites it, and he just sit there and he shook the shit out of it. And I could see it.
Yeah.
And he's got the head. I got a hook up there on this one, not like that fly. He turned around, swam away, and never once. And I jacked him, and then he kind of, I know I stuck the hook in him.
Yeah.
He just shook his head a little bit and kept swimming. But he never went like, it's just like, well, I must have a pincher in my mouth or something.
Yeah.
And just shook the living shit out of it. Then I let one do it. It was a pretty spectacular day. They just never stopped, and everything was visual. And I just let him swim away. I was with Doug. He goes, set the hook. I said, I was wondering how far he'll go. I mean, I don't know shit. They're like pissant at little 20-inch bulls.
Yeah.
They weren't like giant bulls or something. They were, but it just swam away with it. I mean, until my line pulling on it, right? He's pulling away. So I don't know. I would think that if something had a bigger bite than a brown, it might be a bull. There's probably some research out there.
I'm sure.
You can look
I
this up.
did a light Google and couldn't find anything. But that reminded me of a steelhead I lost, and kind of the question of like how do fish get off sometimes? And I know you've got all this experience with fish biting things, having them in their mouth, pulling forever, and then letting it go, and then oftentimes coming back. Right? You just talked about the 2 steelhead examples. Well, I had this fish that ate. It really made me question my intelligence because it was giant water, and I swing into the left bank that I'm standing on.
You know how many jokes I just left laying there?
I know.
Go ahead.
I could see the wheels spinning in your head. It came right in. It did that flip right by the bank, right? Mm-hmm. And then I thought I hooked the heaviest rock in the world. I remember thinking to myself, I was like, damn, that rock hit hard. And then it just didn't move. And I lifted up like I was going to throw a loop at it. And like, how stupid am I? To quote Johnny, it's never a goddamn rock. Never. It's not a rock until it is.
Said I hate that.
I know.
When people tell me that, I'm like, oh.
But for whatever reason, I was so sure. And I know, most of the time I'm pretty good about this, but, and then all of a sudden, the thing's 100 feet into my backing downstream. And then, I fought it all the way back up to me, never jumped, it never death rolled. It just chugged all the way back up. And I went down to it, kind of met in the middle. And I've got good angles on it, and then it didn't head shake or nothing, and that fly just came back at me. And it keeps me up at night. And, skin hooked.
Yeah, to have that much of a piece of skin in the hook, you just have it right there. Finally, you got 3 things. You got line tension, hook strength, and flesh strength. 4 if you count the hook. I did straighten a hook out once.
You did?
On film.
On
yes.
A large.
It still hurts me.
20.
It still hurts me.
4 plus.
Maybe.
Brown trout jumped.
I don't know.
I love that line.
But something's got to give. And there's a point where I've had bass do that where when I was diving, I said this, when I didn't start diving for trout. I started diving with a spinning rod and a jointed Rapala for smallmouth. And I lived on East Bay, Lake Michigan in Traverse City, and I would just swim around, did it a ton. And I would find fish, and I would cast over them and sink down and just start reeling underwater, right? You don't get a lot of hook set. And so, and just watch them. And usually it's less than 5 foot of water. And so I would see them frequently grab, in particular, post-spawn fish where the males are still guarding the beds. You would see them grab stuff and just run over there and let it go, right? They grab back in the day, we didn't have that really good at worm stuff, but you had a few. But they would actually bite a Rapala and swim away with it to let it go, just to get it away from their bed. They weren't eating it at all. And I frequently saw, and they got a small mouth, right? Frequently would see them swim and let it go and then turn around, start swimming, turn right back and get it, right?
Yeah.
But they're doing a job. And the trout he's going to eat it. But that's why we're not supposed to catch them all.
Right. Yes.
There's a lot of variables in there.
Yeah, it goes back to just do what you enjoy.
I was talking about Schmidt earlier, and Ray, and I remember when Kevlar, I think it was a braid came out of some sort in the really early days. And it was so thin and you couldn't break that stuff, couldn't knot it either. But it was a pain in the ass. And I said to Ray, this stuff's incredible. And he was a little bit pissed. He says, there has to be some point where, the fact that your line couldn't break, it just really bugged him. Like, there's got to be a variable that's in the trout's favor. And at first I just thought he was a crazy old man, which he wasn't then. And I thought later, I'm like, yeah, I mean, wouldn't if you took it all away? That'd suck. I mean, then you don't have to have any skill. Just turn around and walk some bitch like you do ice fishing. When I was a little kid, when you'd get a bite, your dad said, go. And you just walk backwards, the thing pops out of the ice. So, I don't know. Digression.
Yeah, something that always interested me was like the thought of respecting fish while fishing for them. Like when the steelhead returns were low, there were dudes that were cutting their hooks off. They're going out fishing, grease lining, dry lining.
Scotty Howell did that, still does, I think, forever.
Yeah.
I don't think he did it for conservation. I think he just did it because he was over. I don't know. He's got a great video. You ever seen it? Chasing the ghost or something like that?
Is that the Scientific Anglers one?
No, I don't think so. It might be, but I think he was chasing the ghost or something like that. And he's a great big guy, and he's a psycho. He's out there wandering around in the middle of the night, and people are like, the first part, he's out on a rock, and it's dark, right?
Yeah.
He's bigger than the rock. So he's out there, and he goes, and gets there, and hooks this fish, and it gets off, and it reels in, and it's off foam fly, and he's like, wind. He's got tooth marks in the foam. That's all he fished for. I don't know if he still does, don't know if he did it forever, but I've talked to people. I don't know Scott. I've met him once, and he's a friend of Scott with Walt Graub. But I don't know. I had a friend, Bob Shaw, passed last year. Bob, a lot older than I am. He's a good friend, and he, I don't remember, in the 80s sometime, he bought all these hooks with they had like little ball bearings on the end of the hook. This round spot. You couldn't hook yourself if you tried. You didn't give it, he'd go out and fish that thing, just see him eat it, and just, well, cut the freaking hook out, who cares?
Yeah.
Just cut the whole thing off.
Yeah, well, just tie it on a shank.
Great. But he would get like a jump out of them.
Yeah.
But he never hooked one. He got a couple, but not really.
I mean, that's my favorite part. Now, if I'm fishing for steelhead, it wouldn't be bad to land one every once in a while. I mean,
Scotty, and there is something, and I haven't seen. Johnny's the one that showed me the video. There's something in there about he hadn't landed a fish in 3 years or something.
That's awesome.
It was a badge of honor.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, it's an interesting idea of like, I know it's somewhat common in European salmon culture, and I think Atlantic salmon culture, like to only fish grease line or dry line, like no lead, no weight, nothing, because you're only gonna theoretically battle with the healthiest fish. That's gonna, the most aggressive. That's gonna move a long ways to eat the top of the column. So you're kind of
strange because it's a lot of places it's mandated that you kill the fish as soon as you catch it.
Yeah.
I'm thinking, well, I'm not sure about this theory.
Yeah, it's almost like a respect thing.
Respect this.
Yeah, where were we? So, killing fish, respecting fish.
You said something about the healthiest fish and all that.
The healthiest fish, the one that's going to actually, come up to the top of the column and eat a fly is. I get it. There's a respect thing there, but your line that I always like is, "This is a blood sport." I mean, it's hard to respect a fish.
Well, you can respect it and still have some rules, just like you're going to kill a whitetail too, right? But you can do it. I watch guys cry afterwards. I've seen guys do all kinds of stuff with them, but I mean, it's like.
You're talking about Luke Bryan.
Huh?
You're talking about Luke Bryan.
No, not that.
Everybody's seen that
Oh
clip.
God, I almost hope that's fake.
Is he down?
I hope that's fake. But but a lot of Atlantic salmon, you had to kill your fish. I mean, there's something to be said about that, which this is a whole nother, I'm not going to go into this stuff because kind of stupid. But, you know, in the old days, you caught your limit and then you left, or you caught what you wanted to eat. We didn't let fish go, you just ate them, right? And for a long time, depending on the beat in the river and the country, you killed your Atlantic salmon, but you didn't get to, there was no keep fishing them.
Right.
You hooked your fish and landed it, and you might get one, you might get two. I don't know, there's probably rules all over. I don't know all the rules, but reading as a kid, you know, that was your deal, and you were done, right? You didn't get to go molest the rest of them. And I mean, the fish that you catch and kill, you catch and kill. The fish that you catch and fight for 40 minutes because you don't know how to fight your fish or whatever, you killed that one too, probably. But I don't know. So there was a lot of that controversy when catch and release first started coming out, when we, you know, were out not killing anything, and we fought every fish. And I think they're a lot stronger than people give them credit for, though. I don't think very many of them die at all. And I don't know. I don't like going down that road. Like I said, it is a blood sport. You are hooking.
I mean, it's a living animal that you're putting
Yeah,
a sharp piece of metal through its face.
Yeah, it's whatever. Call it what you want to call
Yeah.
it. It is what it is. And we do it for our pleasure. Kind of like picking on Johnny.
Right.
You know, he's like a big dumb animal. I wonder if you put a ring in Johnny's nose. I'll have to ask Rosie. Does he actually do what he's told?
I'll let you ask Rosie that one.
Yeah, you never know about these people.
Okay, so going back to this original question from Joe,
Thanks for the question, Joe.
Yeah.
Got a lot of mileage out of that thing.
yeah, that's going to be a whole show on that. Good reminder, if you guys have questions, leave them in the comments. We're always looking for more stuff to talk about. And so going back to Joe's question, downstream, across, active retrieves, I mean, fish will make mistakes. If you have that fly in the water, no matter what it's doing, eventually you're going to catch a fish, even if it's swinging. And
Even if it's a shitty fly.
yeah, rainbows eat them. Brown trout will occasionally do it. I mean,
I said it a lot of times. Our flies don't really look like anything. I mean, I've made a career out of designing flies, right? In reality, it doesn't really look like a whole lot. Maybe a nymph does, but a streamer is...
especially when you get into the whites and the chartreuses.
That's cute, but I mean, I've got a lot of flies, or fish on that fly.
Yeah.
And it's, I guess maybe a little bit, but I'm pretty sure if we set it right next to a minnow, it wouldn't be quite like a rapala. But they do make mistakes.
They make mistakes, and there's things you can do to up your chances. For me, throwing spey rods mostly, active retrieves equal brown trout, passive retrieves equal rainbows, and that's a rule of thumb. I mean, you write in and tell me I'm full of shit. That's my experience, and I think all the other guys at the shop, Chuck and Chris and all the other dudes that are Kahana, Matt now are on the spey rods. I think they've all had similar experiences. So, it's definitely not
And
the most...
Joe didn't tell us what it was, what the fish was. Rainbow
No,
or
he
brown.
didn't. No, he didn't.
I'm guessing it's a rainbow, but
That would be my guess. Definitely most of the big fish I've caught swinging are rainbows. But, trout spey, definitely not the most effective way to target fish. There's times where I think that they eat it really well. There's days where they want it swung and slow, and days where they want it fast and stripped.
there's
But
days when dry flies don't work either.
there are. But every day is a good day to look your friend in the eyes and tell them that you can cast further than them.
I guess that's all it is.
Yep.
Write that book.
All right. Well, I think
can
that's
cast
great.
farther than you.
That may be my first. Would that be a novel? Might be a novel.
It would definitely be a fiction.
Yes. You got anything else you want to add in?
No, I was just thinking about Joe's question, though, because it's good, because I truly think it's just like when whoever asked me what was new, what was coming, you know, this topwater streamer bite thing where we're doing more of that. It's no different than the Spey thing has stuck, right? It's here. It's in every, it's got a lot of traction now. And I think it always comes from young anglers. You never see anything from freaking dinosaurs like me, you know, it's like, you just, after a while, it's like, yeah, whatever, your turn. I don't know why, but it's hard to keep doing that new stuff. And it's like anglers nowadays, you know, 15, 14, 16, it's so much younger. But time an angler gets to be your age, or younger than you, like Hunter's age, nowadays they've absorbed so much, right? There's so much information. And to me, the difference watching it, you know, people that in a year become really freaking good. I mean, really good. And 5 years in, say they're 22, 3, especially you start like, you think of the guy, you know, the advantage you have when you started hanging out here with 15 other people like-minded who fish every freaking day,
oh
right?
My God,
the curve is like that. Yeah. And so to me, that's always been our future. When I first started writing for Fly Fisherman way back, and John Randolph was the editor, and they used to do a lot of, I think nowadays they don't do much of that like they used to, but it used to be techniques, right? And it was just technique. That was your only source, right? There wasn't much else out there. You could read books, but most of the books were old by the time you got them. Now, they've got it. It's there. It's in, you know, every day. I mean, shit, you can sit and watch videos and videos and videos all day and actually learn, not the kind of videos you watch, but you can actually learn stuff.
Sorry, Mom.
And so, sorry, Mom. I think you'll see that this Trout Spey thing, you'll take the guys, you know, all the guys, Joe Moore and those guys up at BSA that are started out as such unbelievable anglers, right? You just don't get better than those guys.
Right.
I mean, their top 5 guys you just don't. That's Johnny World, those guys. I mean, you get guys down in the, but when you see their staffs and they come in with this young staff, and they're all Trout Spey guys, right? For those who don't know, they have an incredible Trout Spey clave in West Yellowstone in the fall at BSA. It's another Big Sky Anglers in Yellowstone. But it'll be you guys that will. It's kind of like when we started the streamer game, right? And everybody told me I was ruining the world. You're welcome. Yes, we were. We ruined the whole world. But the new guys, your age and that 18 to 30, they will come up with something. They will have a trout. And then all the Spey guys are going to tell you ruined Spey fishing. And I'll be so happy.
Well, that's what, I was up at Barnes Hole, which is also not a secret. Where I think at some point you got to tell your story about Barnes Hole. I love
the Rotary Club?
Yes.
This is a rotational pool.
Yes. You should tell it now, and then I'll get into what I was saying.
It's a very old tradition at the Barnes too. Oh, both of them. But where I was up there one day filming, and somebody.
This is on the Madison in the park.
In the park, yep. And I was up there filming about the Madison is all it was. We weren't really, fishing was secondary. We were just showing people the accesses and stuff like that. And it's not like a secret. Freaking 4 million people go through there. And so I was up there, and there's this tradition, which is I find really cool. I agree. First of all, there can be a lot of guys fishing it, and it's a social club. And they rotate the pool in a traditional, if you will, pre-even steelhead, Atlantic salmon steelhead style rotation, where you set on the run and you step it off. And
it's working downstream.
One guy swinging flies. Yeah, and you'll get halfway through, and the next guy starts above you, and they go below, and then you come out, and you go to the table, and you sit and you drink and have coffee or whatever you're going to do, and tell stories, and really really cool.
Yeah, it's
And
a
people
very
say-
social way to fish.
Incredibly. But, everybody's always bitching. All these old guys are all taking up. I says, you dumbass, they're taking up one run. If 12 guys go fishing and take up a run apiece, now you got issues.
Right.
But they're staying right there. But I was filming, and a guy came up the river, and he says to me, he didn't know who I was, and he knew that I knew about it. Once he figured out, and it wasn't a tourist that was just going to, he was afraid I was going to walk through the middle of the run and then have
low hole
issues.
him, right?
I would have high-holed him,
Okay,
and I would have come in from the top. But he was 50, 100 yards from the run. He was just coming up to make sure I knew the rules. And I said, I don't know if you know. And I said, and he goes, oh, hi, hey, Kelly. I said, hey, how you doing? He goes, yeah, I know all about the rotation. I says, I'm not really fishing. I'm just here filming. And I said, I'm not going to come down there. I'm just going to stay up here, and I'm going to run this and talk about the water in the park and accesses and where you can, the bugs and all this shit, right? And and he says, okay. So I get up and I sit out there and I pop this 20-inch rainbow. And there was a bunch of these Eagle River, the fall spawning rainbows in there. And it just takes off. It's just, I'm not trying to catch it. I'm just fishing while I'm talking. Get this fish. And so the guy, he's not gone very long, right? He turns around, he sees me land this fish, and I'm like, oh shit. So I got to go back and finish my thought process, which isn't easy for me. And so I go back up, boom, get another one. This time the guy walks a little closer. So finally the third one comes, and I get another one. There must have been a dozen fish in that pocket in that corner. And the guy comes up, and he's kind of walking up, and I said, this is a rotational corner, and I'm rotating it. He goes, fair enough. No, he was great about it. It wasn't but it was. And I just, as soon as I said it, I said, just kidding. So you can fish up here if you want, I'm done. And
it is an interesting dynamic there, though. Like, there's some dudes who they don't move fast enough, and the other guys, that's not really. If you get to a real steelhead river, an Atlantic river, you will be explained. If you come in on something, they're going to explain to you how a run works. Yeah.
And if you drop an anchor on your ass out there, they'll explain that to you too.
Yeah, well, it's like you don't switch flies in the middle of the run.
Three-
There's all sorts of etiquette.
3 casts. Everybody has a different theory. 2 to 5 is somewhere in the world, right?
In steps. Yeah.
2 to 5 casts per step, right? You don't have to step every cast. I mean, sometimes you're pushing like that, but you start throwing 5 casts out there. If there's, it's like 3's pretty good.
Yeah.
You can make up like you had a problem on at least one, so you at least get a bonus one here, right?
Yeah.
But you step that run off, and then you got every right in the world to go right back in that freaking line, and you think that if somebody goes in front of you, you're never gonna get it. I've watched that so many times. I've had anglers come behind me and catch fish. I've come behind them and caught fish on the 3rd, 4th time. Some of the runs, I mean, you don't see it here in the state. Well, in the Clearwater, in a place like that, you could. But on some of those runs in BC, I mean, you're on the Kispiox or the Bab. Them things are long. I mean, it takes you 40 minutes to get to the bottom of the run.
More.
Yeah, easy.
Yeah.
And then you go back to the top. Who gives a shit? That fish is settled right back in, even if somebody else is coming through. But everything has we did that etiquette thing the other day about every style has its, just don't drop an anchor on or plant a mailbox, as they say.
Right.
Don't put a mailbox out. And just get, it's not hard to say. I mean, and that one up there, I got yelled at once for going too fast through it. I mean, I was throwing streamers, which they didn't really care for.
Yeah.
They didn't like that. I said, I'll go really fast through. And I came back and hung out, and I gave up my 2 turns and sat there and I think got drunk with them.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just a bunch of guys. It was fun. I mean,
No, it is
It was
fun.
a super bright, sunny day, and the fishing was so-so. And so I said, I fished a really tiny little, I think I threw a Royal Coachman or some shit, just to be, I'd already fished all morning. I was done. I came up at noon. But there's shit, should be a book. Tom McGuane should write a book on this. I was just reading one of his books last night about amazing. He basically was ahead of me, but everywhere he talked in that book fishing, I thought I was the only guy that ever fished. He's talking about a river that I guided for 13 years and never saw a human being on. He's describing the spots. He's on the sturgeon, the pigeon, all these rivers. I'm like, holy shit, he's like he had a tracker on him, except he was 15 years older than I am. And he talked about his mom I wanted to call Jerry Dennis because Jerry Dennis started his writing career. He was doing now he did a thing on canoeing Michigan. And his buddy Tom, I think, can't remember his McCullough, Tom, a long time ago. They tipped over in the winter with nothing. And they broke into a cabin. And they're going to die. It is perilous. They're in deep poop. But they don't really know what's around them, and they broke into a cabin because they're dying, and it was the Pure Marquette Rod and Gun Club, and the caretaker shows up, which, it was a badass Army, Navy guy or something, but he realized that they were dying, and they weren't trying to steal anything, they were going to save their lives, but the book I was reading, he was the same thing. His mom grabbed the brand. I think if you've never been to Michigan, you got really good hatches at night, and you got a lot of canoes. I mean, a lot. They'll put 100 canoes down a stretch a day, right? And so in certain areas, and I've seen it 10,000 times, somebody grabs that tree branch, and here, out goes one person out of the boat, then the other, and everybody's shit's going down. Yeah, I don't know where that came from, but it's a great book. Oh, I said we should have Tom write a book about fishing etiquette. Actually, Harrison would have been better yet because he's more gruff.
Yeah, angry old fella, huh? No, I think that Barnes whole thing's really cool. And if you guys fish out here and haven't done it, go experience it. I was up there with a couple of the slide-in guys in the fall.
Did you do the rotation?
Oh yeah,
yeah, sweet.
I've done it a bunch now, and You know Jeff from West Yellowstone, big guy. He's like 6'5". He's a Spey dude. I swear to God, he used to drive to Ennis that winter just to talk about Spey fishing with me, because Spey dudes like talking about Spey fishing. And I remember one day we were up there, and there's a couple other guys who I'm sure are West Yellowstone regulars, and I just don't know them. Both of them were probably... A lot of the guys,
Bucky and a lot of the guys at Blue Ribbon.
I know they're always in there.
They're big time. Bucky, I think, has done as much in the fly design stuff as anybody.
Definitely. Lucky Bucky. Buy that. It's great fun. We don't sell.
He's got a lot of them.
Yeah. No, Bucky, Bucky is the man. He's always been so kind to me when I walk in there. But it was other dudes up there. They were probably
He is one of the
70.
few people I can tell you I've never heard a negative comment about.
Ever. No, everybody who has ever met Bucky says.
And the same with all the cats at Big Sky. Those guys were always really and fishy. But anyway, what were you saying?
So I'm up there. There's two other guys who I don't know, and they're 70 to 80 probably, and they're swinging. And then one other guy that was probably in his 50s, and that guy just wasn't moving. He's anchored up. He changed flies 3 times in the run, and Jeff keeps going. If this guy doesn't move, I'm going to drown him. I'm like, Jeff, I believe you.
It's not the same Jeff then that works at Yellowstone with you.
No, different. I don't think
I know
Jeff
who
works.
you're...
Drives a Subaru. He's always going out to BC.
Yeah, no, I know who you mean.
Big dude. He's hilarious. Only fishes Berkheimers. But
not a bad habit.
No, not a bad habit. But yeah, and I remember that same day.
You don't have a Berkey?
What's that?
Gary, do you hear that? He doesn't have a Berkey.
Gary?
Buy one.
Come on, sponsor me. So I'm up there, and I was doing my modified Spey thing with your techniques, throwing a 12.5 foot 7-weight and a slick willy, the full size one. And I fished through that run fast. I got 2 eats from fish I really would have liked to see up close. One of them I just saw a tail come out, and it looked like
that is a perfect cross swing.
It's perfect.
It's not a better run ever.
No, it's the best run.
If that was the way all runs laid out for the Spey cats would
Crush it. There's a reason
there
why
wouldn't
people
be much
spay fish.
difference, really. That's why I say, you guys, but I mean, for a traditional cat to go out there that's my age or 80 or whatever, there was always rules, right? And part of the rules were that you caught fish that way. So there weren't a lot of people. I remember fishing the shallows one time, and somebody asking me about what the hell, it might have been Mike. I was fishing the inside in the morning, and these fish are all that much water.
Oh, yeah.
And a year later, I read in Tom Perro's magazine about this guy who did a thing about fishing skinny water for steelhead, and yet the guys I was with looked at me like I just pissed in my lunch bucket. It was like, why the hell are you doing that? Well, I don't know, maybe the last fish I caught. It just, it's just, but there's a lot of tradition. Like, they may go to Europe and you got where your gilly has to tell you when it's proper to throw your dry fly at a rising fish. There was, I did a, John Gierach and I and one or two other guys started out in a pissing match over some guy. I told him I liked competition because I thought it made better anglers because there were so many, and this guy gets in my face about some shit. And then the editor of this magazine asked me to do an article about it, and John and I don't remember who the other guys were. It started out with just John and I. And I think there's two other guys contributed to it. And it started out over this argument about this guy hated the idea of competition in fly fishing. And he was a kid. And I said, well, people learn from it. And I didn't mean the kind of competition we have now, but it was different. But at any rate, we wrote an article, and of course Gierach ends, his was the last, and it had the greatest line. He says, the way I see it, there's young assholes and there's old assholes. At least the young asshole has the ability to change.
That's great.
And so, you get a guy setting his ways out there, you probably aren't going to change him. 50 is pretty young, but you get one of the locals there but they go through it.
Well, yeah, well, and that was the point I was getting at, was this dude, he's probably sniffing 80. He watches me go through that run with I think I was throwing 10 feet of T11, so I could really move that fly and still have it break the surface. And he watches that, and I walk back up, and he goes, son, are you throwing a huge streamer? I said, yeah. And he goes, I have never seen anyone do that. And this guy's been on Barnes Hole for how long?
He might have invented it.
Yeah, he might have. So
he might have cut the road.
I guess that's, the point of that is go try new stuff. So
yeah.
It's fun, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But
most stuff doesn't work in the beginning.
Right.
When I started actively streamer fishing, it didn't work so well then either. I had a few glory moments, right out of the gate. And the one that started it was that giant dayfish, but didn't really know if that was an anomaly, and it was
just a one-off.
It's just going to be the last time ever. But same thing we were talking about the other day, a lot more zeros than heroes in the days of learning, which is pretty much how everything on Earth is.
Pretty much.
So but I truly think if you guys, even if it was just the 5 of you kept fishing as much as you do what you're doing, you'll come up with different lines and techniques, and your setups aren't perfect yet.
No.
Because you're still adapting to what the steelhead world does, and they don't do what you're doing. And so one of you will say, what if we cut this line up and do that? And the next thing you know,
I've got a lot of ideas about what I want and no idea how to do it. So I guess I just need to make a leap
Will
of faith,
Spalding, you'll get nothing and like it.
Yeah, there you go. All right, well, I think that's a great place to wrap up episode 8 of the Slide In podcast. This episode is brought to you by SlideIn.com. Go buy things. It helps us do these.
Thank you. Hope you enjoyed it.
Thanks for watching. See you next time.